Hey, this is Shaun with the Atlanta Tennis Podcast, powered by Go Tennis. Check out our calendar of Metro Atlanta tennis events at letsgotennis.com. And if you're a fan of Bull Shark Sports, go to shop.letsgotennis.com and get yourself a hoodie or a hat. Today, this is Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hesley. Today, Coach Ben is asking the question, what exactly is growth mindset? Ben, you ready to talk youth sports?
Yeah, this should be fun. Let's dive into it.
All right, today, Coach Ben wants to talk about the quote, growth mindset and how to install it in ourselves. Now, Ben, we can define it, but then let's define it and then also give it its opposite. So, Ben, let me read the definition that I found, which
All right.
is the belief that your abilities and intelligence can be improved through effort, learning, and persistence. Okay, that's a pretty straightforward, maybe even an oversimplification of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's good. Good chat GPT you did there
Right.
on it. But I think, and I brought it up today because it gets thrown around so much now. I mean, originally the growth mindset concept comes from a lady named Carol Dweck, who's a psychology professor at Stanford. She wrote this book actually originally back in 2006, and it's had several updates since then. But now it's just kind of become like something we throw around all the time. Like, oh, he's growth mindset or she's growth mindset. We need to be more growth mindset. Well, what is that? Okay. And I think for starters, I'll take your definition and just basically we'll put it as growth mindset is like I tell the kids that learning and facing challenges and working through difficulties is cool. Trying hard is cool. And that's the elementary kindergarten version of what it is. But I think also look at
And the opposite of that being winning is cool.
right.
I say as a
So
question.
right. Or I shouldn't have to try and win because I'm so naturally gifted at this
Ah.
thing that I don't have to try at all. And if you do try, you're a loser because only those who suck would have to try at something like
Okay.
a sport, right? So, I mean, so the basic definition of that's called a fixed mindset. So, a fixed mindset is basically the opposite of what you said. It's that intelligent and talent. And for today's conversation, we'll talk about athleticism or sports skills. Those are fixed, right? Those are permanent. They cannot change or can hardly change, at least not drastically change. And so that's the basic difference between having a growth mindset that if I work hard and I'm persistent, I can achieve the skills that I want to achieve. But fixed mindset is just, hey man, it's natural. It's a natural talent, natural gift, and we can't really change the course of that very much beyond what it is.
And so the growth mindset is always improving. It's understanding that there is always better. And forgive the reference, we talk about Federer and Nadal often, but they pushed each other. It was the I'm Federer, I'm the greatest, but man, here comes this kid and I got a problem. I'm going to still have to improve. Is that a decent tennis example that says, "Hey, I've got to continue to get better or others are going to surpass me?"
I think that's a perfect example, honestly. I mean, we're astonished because growing up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't see that. I mean, on the tennis side, you were done by 27, 28 years old. I mean, I remember when Agassi was playing at 30, we thought that was amazing. He's 30 years old
Super old.
and
Yeah.
playing tennis. And now these guys are hitting their 40s and they're winning all these grand slams. We just talked about it before we came on. Novak's at 24. I mean, he's more than doubled Sampras, who we thought that record was never going to be broken. And here a guy, the generation later, doubles it. I think growth mindset has a lot to do with that. You could argue things like nutrition's better, training's better,
Oh
coaching's
yeah.
better, the environment these guys are, or travel is better, accommodations are better, whatever. And sure, all those things are true, but I do think the mindset is a huge deal of them continuing to work and continuing. I remember one of the podcasts I was listening to from you guys from the Atlanta Tennis Podcast, Bobby mentioned about Nadal and learning how to volley. Like he got later in his career, he had to learn to move in. He can't grind so much. He's getting injured a good bit. He can't grind so much from the baseline. He's going to have to charge forward and learn to volley and put some balls away at the net to make the points faster. It's a great example of growth mindset and evolving your game to stay current in the sport.
And the belief is the thing there because I'll say I believe Nadal always had good volleys. He just didn't use them often enough. I think he needed the belief that his abilities and intelligence of the tennis game could be successful in a different way, moving forward, shortening the points, which is the growth mindset. I'm using the words from the definition that we brought
Yeah.
up. Do we have other examples? Baseball, basketball? Let's make it as many examples as we can to say, is this the practice thing again? Is this if I practice more? Right? It isn't just practice, but it's understanding that there always is getting better.
Yeah, it's always wanting more challenges, right? Like a simple example, and there's been lots of research on this, but a real simple example is, let's say you bring a bunch of kids into a classroom and you put several math problems on the board, okay? And you say, pick one to solve. Okay. Well, the fixed mindset person is going to pick one that they probably already know the answer to, and it's going to be pretty easy. And they can just go, "Hey, I know that. I recognize that problem. I'll do that one." Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, I got the right answer. Look at me. Look how smart I am. Look how intelligent I am. I know I'm great at math. Whereas the growth mindset person is going to look at those problems and go, "You know what? I want that one. That one seems a little bit challenging. I'll take that one." And they work on it. And they may get the right answer, they may not. But the point to them is not about the outcome so much as about the process and getting and working through the problem and getting an answer. And that is the biggest difference. Fixed mindset people already want to know the answer. Growth mindset people are completely comfortable working through challenges to get that answer.
All right, so using that example, the kids in the classroom, do we think this is installed or do we think there's an inherent version of this? Are there some kids, some people that are inherently this way of saying, I like the challenge? Or is it something we've got to teach young people to be this way? Or is it a combination like nature and nurture?
I think it's I think it's a combo. I mean, I can't. I'm not obviously not a scientist. I haven't done psychological research to tell you that this is something that does or doesn't come out of the womb, so to speak, and you're wired like this. I do think it, but to argue fixed versus growth, that is something that is a big concept. Is like fixed mindset is that you do come out wired to be quote smart or athletic, whereas growth mindset is more like, hey, this is a process that you're going to have to work through. And the environment that we create, especially as parents and coaches, can definitely, and I'll use the word nurture this concept. And it's something that you have to work on continually. I know it's as a coach, it's something that we have to instill in our young athletes and start moving that needle forward and getting them to think like this and getting their parents to think like this because it's in our world today, it's not easy. And honestly, Dr. Dweck wrote this book almost, 18 years ago, and she really wrote it a, a lot of different things in there, a lot of different subject matters of how growth mindset applies. But you really did it on 90s kids that were entering the workforce and all the problems that were going on at that point with how kids were raised in the late 80s and 90s and how that affected them in the workplace. But we're seeing it now today with social media and everything. Like it just makes this concept much more difficult to practice.
So practice in that case to actually implement, not practice meaning repeat. So how do I implement it? So I say, somebody's watching this video and says, you know what, Coach Ben, you're right. You've changed my life. I'm now going to be growth mindset from now on. I'm going to teach my kids. I'm going to go home and tell my spouse, tell my significant other, honey, we are now growth mindset. What do they do? What does that look like?
That's what happens. You go, hey, I read this book, I read this article, I saw this podcast, or we're listening to this podcast, and like, yeah, aha moment. Oh, we're totally switching gears. We're gonna be growth mindset people. And it doesn't work that way. And it really starts with a question you have to ask yourself. So let's give an example. We talked last week about safetyism, right? We want our kids to be safe. We want them to be physically safe, but or also we want them to be emotionally safe. And so let's say you're watching your kid. Let's use a baseball example. You're watching your kid and he strikes out. Okay. First instinct as parents like, oh my God, what's wrong? What happened? What happened? Why? Instead, growth mindset is more like, hey, that's unfortunate, yet it's a great opportunity for him to learn. Maybe he learned more about his skills as a hitter for the next at bat. Maybe he learned some coping skills and how to handle that and how we had to pivot. We call it pivoting. You have to pivot. Okay, I just struck out. No big deal. Let's pivot. Grab your glove. It's time to go back out in the field and play defense. And that's more the response, not really a question, I guess, but more of a response as a parent you need to have when a situation like that is unpleasant uh, happens to you.
So, can this be a good thing? Can this be a learning moment or a teaching moment? And I know those of us, you and me, coach types, we sometimes overdo the teaching moments. Not everything has to be a teaching moment or a learning moment. But in this case, when we're talking about installing something like this mindset, a mindset maybe like a diet, it can be a fad. Say, you know what? I'm going to cut out my Diet Cokes, or I'm going to stop drinking high fructose corn syrup. Whatever those things are, it's like you usually last a little while and then it kind of falls off the radar, or you give up and say, I'm not seeing the results. Is this the kind of thing, I ask knowing the answer to the question, that goes beyond sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's something you're constantly working on, until you build it. And the best way to make it a habit is just consistently try to practice it. I mean, diets are things that are going to go away, right? It's something I'm going to try for a minute and then I'm going to give it up, right? Um, but it's basically all about accepting challenges, right? And pursuing challenges and wanting more challenge. Very much like the example of the math problem.
Find out what you're capable of. I know plenty of people that have put that off. I know I put that off a long time in my life as well. Let's step out and find out what you're capable of. And maybe that strikeout is the thing that I learn from. Sorry for the sentence there. That's the thing from which I learned the thing I needed to know next. What is there a seminal moment that says, ooh, you know what? That's awesome. I've learned something from this, even though it was theoretically a bad thing. Now, that's the starting point to say, I'm going to be growth mindset now. The question is, can I just always view life that way? It's hard because sometimes bad things happen and there aren't necessarily things to learn from it. So, again, it goes past sport in general. So, Ben, what's the last thing? What's the
Yeah,
point
I
here that
think.
you're going to
Well, I,
say,
I think.
here's the point?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think just basically understanding that, and let's use sports as an example, right? Your child's development in sport, it's a process, right? You can't live and die on how they do as a 9-year-old, or how they do as a 10-year-old, right? And there's lots of sports examples that show us that, right? And lots of sports examples that we just mentioned with Nadal and Federer, but we have Michael Jordan's one and Kobe Bryant's another that evolved themselves later on in their careers to continue to be relevant. And it's just understanding is that this is a process. Growth mindset is a process. Challenges are great. Coping skill or learning to coping skills are great. Learning coping skills is great. Frustrations are good, right? You have to go through frustrations. Um, and I think for a lot of people, it's hard because, it is easy to be fixed mindset. Hey, my kid's batting average is this. Hey, our team won this game or we won this championship. And that's what we see on social media, right? But just understand that what you see out there is there's so much work underneath. I love that like image of an iceberg. It's like success, and it shows like here's the water and here's the little iceberg of success, but then underneath the surface is this long piece of ice, right? The base of the iceberg, and that's the growth mindset part. That's the pursuit towards success, is continually challenge yourself and continue to understand that this is challenging. It is hard. It should be hard, and hard is fun. I think that's the bottom line. Last thing I'll say is that working kids to a point where they understand that having challenges is fun, right? I often tell my teams, I'm like, when we play a game, there's like this moment, this like tiny moment in the time. We're out here for 2 hours playing a baseball game. There's a brief moment in time when a winner and a loser is realized, and that's at the end of the game. Okay. And that feeling lasts for a few seconds for most people. Okay. I know there's stories of guys, oh, I was so mad for a whole week about my game. No, not kids. Kids are like crying, and then 10 seconds later, they're out there playing tag with their buddies in the field adjacent to the baseball park, right?
Mm-hmm.
So doesn't, so that little moment of wearing that little moment that's captured on Facebook is such a small thing compared to the game, the process, and all those fun and exciting things that happen on the course of that outcome. So focus on those fun and exciting journey, the path, that, and not so much what happens at the end.
There we go. I don't even have to ask, did we answer the question? Because I think that's your answer right there. Ben, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. This has been Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hesley. I appreciate your time. We'll see you next week. Thank you, sir.
All right. Have fun, guys. Get to practice and enjoy your practices.